"I'm taking half of everything you own," Lucas declared in court, his voice smug, echoing like a victory march. Those words still rattle in my head. They weren't just greedy. They were a betrayal 5 years in the making. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. These true-to-life stories of betrayal and revenge come every week. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if the person you trusted most tried to rob you in court? My name is Sheila Carter, I'm 46 years old, and this is the story of how my husband Lucas tried to steal my grandmother's fortune, and how a single envelope in my purse turned the entire courtroom against him. But to understand how we got to that moment, you need to know where it all began. I met Lucas at a business conference in Atlanta. I was 41 at the time, exhausted from running my design consultancy, Carter & Company. Consulting. My father had passed away the year before, and loneliness crept in like an unwelcome shadow. I was vulnerable, I didn't even realize it then. Lucas noticed. He had a way of making you feel like the only person in the room. Sharp suit, easy smile, words that flowed like honey. He asked questions about my business, not small talk but deep questions. Questions only someone paying close attention would ask. "You're brilliant," he told me one night over dinner, watching me sketch out a business model on a napkin. "I've never met a woman who understands numbers and strategy the way you do." At the time I thought he admired my mind. Now looking back, I know he was already calculating my worth. Our courtship was a whirlwind, expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, flowers delivered to my office every Monday morning. Felt like a dream. A second chance at love when I'd already convinced myself love had passed me by. After just 9 months, Lucas proposed. A rooftop dinner, string lights glowing over the city, a diamond ring that sparkled a little too much for someone on a sales manager's salary. I hesitated. My attorney Michelle Daniels had already warned me, "Sheila, you've worked your entire life for your business and your savings. Protect yourself. Get a prenup." Bringing it up with Lucas terrified me. What if he thought I didn't trust him? What if it ruined the romance? But Lucas only laughed. "Of course, darling. If it makes you comfortable. I'm marrying you for love, not money." He signed the prenup casually, as though it were nothing more than a dinner receipt. I should have known then. That one careless signature would one day ruin him. When the inheritance came, it changed everything. My grandmother left me her lake house, her investments, and almost $3 million in savings. I was shocked and grateful. To me it wasn't just money, it was her life's work, her love, her trust in me. But to Lucas it was an open wallet. Within 6 months he quit his job. He said it was so he could support me, but in reality he just stopped working. He joined an expensive golf club, bought a luxury car, and started investing in half-baked business ideas. Every dollar he spent came from me. He began introducing himself to people as if the inheritance belonged to him. At the country club I once heard him say, "Our family money allows us to invest long-term." Our money? Family money? I stood there frozen. None of it was his. At home I tried to correct him. "Lucas, this was my grandmother's estate. It's not family money." He laughed. "Semantics, Sheila. People respect us more if I say it that way." The more he repeated that lie, the more people believed him. Contractors, event planners, even friends started calling it our property. I was disappearing from my own inheritance. That's when I started to prepare. Quietly. I met with my attorney Michelle and brought every document I had. Separate accounts. Bank statements. Proof that I never mixed my inheritance with our household expenses. I kept everything clean just like Michelle had advised me years ago. She told me something I'll never forget. Men like Lucas will try 3 arguments when they see a prenup: fraud, pressure, or unfairness. But you have every receipt. You have every detail. This will hold. Her words gave me strength. But the real shock came later. One evening Lucas left his laptop open. I saw an email he had been writing to another lawyer. The subject line was, "Divorce strategy." He had been planning to leave me. Worse, he was asking how to get half of my assets even with a prenup in place. He wanted to time the divorce to hit me when I was busiest at work so I wouldn't have the energy to fight. My heart pounded as I scrolled through his messages. All those smiles, all those sweet words, they were part of a plan. A long game to strip me of everything. That night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made my decision. I wouldn't wait for him to strike. I filed for divorce first. When Lucas received the papers, he smirked at me like it was a game. "Sheila, don't be silly. If you make this hard, I'll take half. At least." I said nothing. I just thought about the manila envelope waiting in my purse. The one that carried his downfall. Because the moment we walked into that courtroom, Lucas had no idea that the signature he once dismissed as just a formality would soon destroy everything he thought he was about to gain. When I entered the courtroom in Nashville, the air was heavy, almost suffocating. Dark wood walls, rows of reporters with their pens ready, and strangers waiting to see how much of my fortune Lucas would take. Lucas walked in like he already owned the place. His suit was tailored, one I had paid for, of course. His smile was smug. He shook hands with his lawyer, a thin man who carried himself like he'd already won. When Lucas sat down across from me, he didn't even look nervous. He leaned back in his chair and flashed me a smile that said, "It's over. I've won." The judge, a serious woman in her 60s, asked Lucas's attorney to speak first. And just as I expected, the lies started rolling out. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, "my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including Mrs. Carter's inheritance. During their marriage, Mr. Carter contributed emotionally and supported her career. He gave up his own job to help her grow her business. It is only fair that he receives his share." I sat still, but inside my blood boiled. Lucas hadn't sacrificed anything. He had quit his job to spend my money. He had used my grandmother's estate as if it were his allowance. But I didn't speak. Not yet. I kept one hand on my purse where the manila envelope waited. That envelope held the only truth that mattered. The prenup Lucas had signed with his own hand 5 years earlier. As the lawyer went on and on, I watched the reporters scribble in their notebooks. I could almost hear them thinking, "Millionaire wife, greedy husband, big settlement." Lucas turned his head slightly, smirking at me again. He thought this was a show and he was the star. Then the judge looked at me. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "do you have a response to these claims?" This was my moment. I rose from my seat, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I do." I reached into my purse and felt the thick paper of the envelope between my fingers. My lawyer, Michelle, gave me a quick nod. She knew exactly what was about to happen. I stepped forward and handed the envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The courtroom went silent, except for the soft rip of the seal being opened. Lucas frowned. For the first time all morning, his confidence cracked. The judge's eyes moved across the pages. She flipped once, twice, and then looked back at Lucas's lawyer. Her tone shifted. "Counsel, were you aware of this document?" The lawyer's face drained of color. "Your Honor, we were not." I turned and looked at Lucas. His smirk was gone. His lips moved, whispering something frantic to his lawyer. He was pale, his jaw clenched, his fingers drumming the table. That was the moment I realized. Lucas finally understood he wasn't walking out rich. He was walking straight into the trap he'd signed for himself. The judge placed the prenup on her desk. "We will take a short recess while I review this thoroughly," she said. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. And just like that, Lucas's smile disappeared forever. When the judge returned from recess, the entire courtroom went quiet. Reporters leaned forward, spectators held their breath, and Lucas sat stiff in his chair, his face pale. Before I continue, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And let me ask you, if you were in my place, would you trust the judge to deliver justice, or would you speak up yourself? Comment below, I'm curious. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Lucas's lawyer. "This prenuptial agreement," she said, "is valid, properly signed and notarized. It is thorough and it protects Mrs. Carter's inheritance as her separate property." The words hit like thunder. Lucas jerked upright in his seat. "What? That can't be right. I don't even remember signing that." The judge's eyes hardened. "Mr. Carter, control yourself. You will not interrupt these proceedings." Lucas's lawyer scrambled through the papers, his hands shaking. He whispered frantically to Lucas, who shook his head over and over, whispering back, "This isn't real. This isn't happening." But it was. The judge cleared her throat and began to read parts of the document out loud. Section 4, Paragraph A. All assets owned prior to marriage remain the separate property of the original owner. Section 4, Paragraph B. Any inheritance received during the marriage shall remain separate property and not be subject to division upon divorce. Every sentence was like a nail sealing Lucas's coffin. His face flushed red then drained white. He gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned pale. Reporters scribbled furiously, some even smirking as they realized the story had flipped. The greedy husband wasn't winning millions, he was losing everything. Lucas stood up suddenly, his voice breaking. "Your Honor, she tricked me. She said it was just a formality. She trapped me." The judge's voice cut like a knife. "Sit down, Mr. Carter. No one forced you to sign this agreement. You waived your right to independent counsel. You admitted the document was signed voluntarily. Do not insult this court." He sat heavily, breathing hard, glaring at me like I had stabbed him. But I only looked back calmly. I wanted him to know that his downfall wasn't my doing. It was his own greed. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, have you kept your inheritance separate from marital funds?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said firmly. "My inheritance has never been used for joint expenses. Household bills were covered by my business income. The estate money has stayed in separate accounts." Lucas exploded again. "That's a lie. He paid for vacations. She bought things for us." The judge slammed her gavel. "Enough. Mr. Carter, one more outburst and I will have you removed." The room went dead silent. Everyone could see Lucas unraveling, the polished image gone. He wasn't the confident man who walked in this morning. He was desperate, exposed, and losing. The judge continued reviewing the agreement. I sat quietly, my lawyer at my side, while Lucas whispered angrily to his attorney. But nothing they said could change the truth. The prenup was airtight. And Lucas knew it. The judge closed the document, looked directly at Lucas and said, "Mr. Carter, based on this agreement, you are entitled to nothing." Lucas's mouth fell open. His head dropped into his hands. And the worst was still to come. When the judge lifted her eyes from the prenup, the air in the courtroom shifted. You could feel it. The reporters stopped writing for a second, the spectators leaned closer, and Lucas sat there, his face tight, his knuckles white against the polished table. The judge's voice was calm, but each word landed like a hammer. "This prenuptial agreement is valid, properly signed, and legally binding. It clearly states that Mrs. Carter's inheritance remains her separate property. Mr. Carter, you are entitled to nothing from it." The silence that followed was heavy. You could almost hear hearts beating. Lucas's head shot up. "Nothing? That's impossible. 5 years of marriage." The judge cut him off with a sharp look. 5 years of living off your wife's money does not make you the owner of her assets, Mr. Carter." Reporters scribbled furiously, pens scratching against paper. I caught sight of one woman in the back shaking her head, almost smiling. She could see it just like everyone else. Lucas wasn't a victim. He was a man exposed in front of the world. But it wasn't over. The judge turned to Michelle, my attorney. "Mrs. Carter, do you have documentation regarding Mr. Carter's individual debts?" Michelle stood smoothly and handed over a thick folder we had prepared. My hands trembled slightly as I watched the judge flip through it page by page. Credit card debt, unpaid club fees, a luxury car loan, a failed restaurant investment, the judge read aloud. She looked directly at Lucas. "In total, $92,000. And according to this agreement, those debts are solely your responsibility." Gasps filled the courtroom. A murmur ran through the crowd like a ripple across water. Some people even laughed quietly, unable to hide their disbelief. Lucas slammed his palm on the table. "This is insane. He tricked me. She told me it was just a formality." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Carter, control yourself. You signed this agreement voluntarily. You waived your right to independent counsel. You cannot now claim ignorance." His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering desperately, but Lucas shook him off. His face was red, his breathing heavy. He turned toward me, eyes full of rage and panic. "You planned this," he spat. "You trapped me." I finally spoke, my voice steady. "No, Lucas. You trapped yourself the day you signed without reading, because you thought you were too clever to ever need protection." The judge tapped her pen against the desk. "Mrs. Carter, have you kept your inheritance separate from marital accounts?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Every dollar of my grandmother's estate has been kept separate. Household bills were always paid from my business income. The inheritance was never touched for shared expenses." Lucas jumped in again. That's a lie. She paid for vacations for dinners. The judge cut him off like a blade. Mr. Carter, sit down. Vacations are not proof of shared ownership of inherited funds. One more interruption and you will be removed from this courtroom. He slumped back into his seat, but the damage was already done. Everyone in the room had seen him unravel. I sat straighter, breathing in deeply. For months I had carried the fear that somehow Lucas would twist the story, that somehow he would manage to win. But in that moment I knew, the truth was stronger than his lies. The judge closed the folder with a firm snap. Based on my review, this court finds that Mr. Carter has no claim to Mrs. Carter's inheritance or her premarital business assets. Furthermore, he remains solely responsible for the debts he incurred. The divorce petition is granted. The gavel struck again, a sound like thunder rolling through the room. It was finished. Lucas leaned back in his chair, stunned. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Finally, I heard him whisper, 5 years, wasted. I stood slowly, adjusted my jacket, and looked at him one last time. Not wasted, Lucas. Learned. Some lessons cost money. Yours cost everything. The room erupted in whispers, cameras flashing as reporters pushed forward. But I felt calm. Free. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest was gone. I walked out of that courtroom knowing the battle was over. Or at least that's what I thought. Because what came after was Lucas's true collapse. At first, Lucas tried to put on a brave face. He walked out of the courthouse with his head held high, pretending nothing had happened. But within days, reality started to crush him. Creditors began to call. The luxury car he loved so much was repossessed in front of his neighbors. The country club he bragged about sent him a formal letter canceling his membership. People he used to charm at parties suddenly ignored his calls. 6 weeks after the verdict, his reputation was destroyed. Reporters published articles with headlines like, "Nashville husband loses $1 million divorce battle, leaves with debt." He had become a cautionary tale overnight. By 3 months, Lucas was drowning. He filed for bankruptcy, his credit shattered. He couldn't rent an apartment, couldn't qualify for a loan, couldn't even maintain the image he had built around himself. He packed his bags and moved back in with his parents in Memphis. A 47-year-old man starting over with nothing. And the worst part? Everyone knew why. At every social event, his name was a warning. Women whispered to each other, "Stay away from him. He only sees dollar signs." For me, life moved in a different direction. I used part of my inheritance to launch the Carter Foundation, an organization that helps women protect themselves before marriage. We provide free guidance on prenuptial agreements, asset protection, and divorce defense. I wanted to make sure no woman ever stood in a courtroom as unprepared as Lucas thought I was. I poured my energy into my business too. Carter & Company. Consulting grew stronger than ever. Clients admired not just my financial skills, but my resilience. I wasn't just a businesswoman anymore. I was someone who had faced betrayal and come out stronger. One evening, I sat on the porch of my grandmother's lake house, looking at the water reflecting the moonlight. I thought about her, the woman who taught me to be careful, to plan, to never let anyone take advantage of kindness. She had saved me without even knowing it, through the wisdom of insisting on that prenup years ago. Lucas thought he could own my grandmother's legacy. Instead, he destroyed himself trying. I thought I had lost years to a greedy man. But what I really gained was freedom. Faith. And the certainty that I would never again let anyone put a price tag on my worth. And that was the end. Lucas's shortcut to fortune became his shortcut to ruin. And for me, it was the start of a life I could finally call mine.